Welcome to the On the Rise podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer.
Welcome to the On the Rise podcast. This is the new faith-driven leader series. We're excited to help equip leaders to learn how to integrate their faith into their work. So we're going to be bringing on guests, various industries connected to real estate, really just hearing stories of how they're overcoming challenges, how they're using their faith in their everyday work. So I've got an awesome guest today, Jason Kish. Jason, welcome to the episode.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nick.
Yeah, very excited to get to hear more about your story, kind of your journey leading up to working now with Rise 48. Obviously, we've been colleagues now for several weeks and just excited to kind of just continue to grow together as we seek to labor here at Rise 48. So to get things started, Jason, I'd just love to hear your story, kind of your history, your bio, things that you've been working on up until Rise 48, and then we'll kind of jump in.
Cool. Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian household, one of four kids, and we were, it was a really great upbringing where I can honestly say my parents did everything they could to equip us and, really give us the privilege of having two invested quality parents that are really doing everything they can for their kids. So, when it comes to starting with my childhood, I have nothing but good to say about it. And, my dad, he was a skilled tradesman at GM. And, we grew up with four kids on that income. And my parents, they taught us a lot about not spending on stupid things, really using money for what it's for, always giving to the church no matter what, and really using it for their future freedom. They actually were able to retire at 53 or 54 years old, which is kind of unfathomable for most people that are working a blue collar job with four kids. So they taught me some really good foundations before sending me off to Grove City College, which is a really interesting college. It has a libertarian bent to it, and it's a great Christian school that has always stuck to its values, no matter what way the political landscape or cultural landscape has shifted. They always stay pretty on target. So that's where I went to college for my 4 years after leaving my house. And where that put me is having this initial foundation financially with my parents, but not really learning a ton about investing. That's not something that we really talked about. So after pretty much, by the time I was ready to graduate college, I was already getting interested in real estate investing before I had the money to do it. So started off, I got married pretty shortly after college. My wife and I, we got into a townhouse that we were renting. And 5 months into renting it, I asked the owner if he was interested in selling. And he actually was interested in selling at that time. So that became our first piece of property. That was where we lived. And, we turned it into a rental eventually. And that's when we were living in Pittsburgh. So I spent almost my entire career, I was at a small business for about 2 years after college. And then I went into, the software as a service tech world, if you will, for the next 14 or so years before joining Rise.
Really cool. That's a great bio. Just to kind of hear how you got involved in real estate, just your family upbringing. Where are you in the lineup with your other siblings?
I'm the youngest. So my sister's 9 years older than me. And then I have brothers that are 7 years older and 4 years older than me.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I want to just kind of double click a little bit on your story because I think this will really help our audience. As we talk about being faith-driven leaders, money is such an important part of our everyday society. And it sounds like from your upbringing, you had some real good foundations revolving around, spending, giving, saving. and even seeing your parents retire early compared to other people. How do you feel like your foundation for how you thought about money shapes who you are today?
I think part of my upbringing that shapes who I am today is that I see money as a tool and not as the end goal. You know, like uh, to be honest with you, I'd have a hard time continuing to work if I was Elon Musk or if I was, Zuckerberg or somebody like that, because I would do other things with my time, things that I would find valuable in a different way than continuing to earn. I feel like a lot of those guys are driven by something else. But you know what money to me, it means to me primarily is freedom, and freedom to not have somebody else control your schedule or control what you need to do or where you need to be. And it's definitely not flashy things. And that's where the upbringing is really strong. My dad, when he could have driven other things, and we're 6'4", you can't tell on camera. We're pretty big guys. My brothers are the same size. And my dad always drove a Cavalier, a Chevy Cavalier. For anybody that doesn't know what those are anymore, they were a small, inexpensive, compact car. And those are what they made in the GM facility that he worked in. And you could get one for like $8,000 in the mid 2000s or like the late 90s. So it was never about being flashy. And I even remember a story that my dad told me about his dad, who, my father wanted to get a good deal because he was at GM, get a good deal for my grandpa to have a Cadillac. And my grandma physically would not let him buy that Cadillac because he said, we're not Cadillac people. And that was just their view of being flashy and spending conspicuously. And that has been passed down in my lineage. And there are a lot of positive things that my grandparents passed to my parents that I want to make sure that I pass down to my kids as well.
Yeah, and so much of our identity can be in who you are is what you drive, right? And I think we can fight against that as faith driven leaders. That there's nothing wrong with having a Cadillac or a nice car, but that doesn't define you. Does your job or your title or all those things. But I think in the church, one thing that I've kind of still evolving and working through is I think there can be a tendency to think about money as, if you have money, there's an automatic proclivity towards evil or even towards, over consumption versus thinking about money as a tool. The Bible talks about the love of money being the root of all evil. And I found myself feeling like this, I don't know if I want to acquire money or resources because the people that I often saw in my life that had a lot of money, maybe they were crushing it at work, but their relationship with their spouse or their kids was left more to be desired. So I'm curious, like, when you think about money being a shaping part of who we are, what was that like for you, and how is your view of money kind of evolving?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'll say is, as much as my grandma wouldn't let my grandpa buy that Cadillac, if I had the disposable money to buy a Cadillac and not have to worry about, where my kids are going to college and all that stuff, like we're early into the game and we have our fourth child coming soon. Um, I'm not against things like that. Cadillac Escalade is a great family vehicle. Um, I was just given a little bit of where I came from, but that does shape the whole idea of, if I was to buy, let's say, a Chevy Tahoe or something else that's, it's much more expensive than the average car and it's more than someone needs, there are still benefits to buying that, not only to you, but the people that build them. And there are all kinds of downstream effects from that. But the whole idea of it is that you don't get things to impress people. It's you're getting it because you need it or want it or have a passion around that kind of thing. Maybe it's art, maybe it's a piece of land that you've really wanted. Things like that are, in my view, not inherently bad at all. It's just, are you doing it for the right reason? And will you be a good steward with it? Like when I think of earning a lot of money or having great investments, it immediately makes me think of the parable of the talents that Jesus teaches. And that's not just about money, but that's about spiritual gifts. That parable is about a lot and not just money. But I think where people need to really reflect, and where I really need to reflect, because this is a real world example. You get a really nice house. Maybe it has some nice luxury features to it. You have a nice couch. You have great expensive carpet. If you were being hospitable to somebody and they messed that thing up, would it hurt relationships? Would it prevent you from forming relationships? Would you maybe not even be hospitable because you have that nice thing? That's really where I think we get in danger with the nice things.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, where is your love? Like, if you have little kids and you buy white carpet and your kids spill something on that white carpet, what's more important? The love of your kids and your affection towards them, or a thing, right? Same thing. You buy a new car, you get that first scratch. It can feel like, oh, something I had just doesn't look at. And now we're both helping investors, steward their resources and wealth. And we've got a really good track record, and so far we've done a really good job at managing people's resources and their investments. But we can't guarantee outcomes. We can't guarantee performance. So we have to be realistic about those things and those resources. And I want to give a vision for the investors that I'm helping, that they should think way beyond financial freedom. Financial freedom is just the start to how we want to help people have the impact that they want. We're going to do a great job stewarding people's investment dollars so that they can have the impact that God has really placed on their heart. So how do you think about like impact? If you were to zoom out 5 or 10 years from now, what's the type of impact that you're looking to create, Jason?
It's kind of tough to answer in one line, because there are multiple ways that I feel that I can impact. And it's just really hard to balance. You know how it is having 4 young kids. So, speaking of kids, I think that's the very first thing. We need to be present fathers. We need to teach them the right principles. We need to bring them up as good Christ followers. I think that that's number one, because, there's one of us, and for us, we have 4 of them. And they're our future on earth, so to speak. The same kind of impact that I was talking about, my grandparents to my parents, to me, that generational impact that you can have as far as the kind of people that you're bringing up, that's the number one thing on my mind, because I know just how much of an impact and how much you can shape your kids. But the other thing that I think of into the future a little bit is, as my investments continue to grow as they have been for the last 15 years or so, and as I gain more and more time freedom, what am I doing with that time freedom? It's not enough just to have time freedom for myself. Am I going to volunteer, teach, spend more time with my kids, be able to spend more time with my future grandkids? There's once you have that time freedom, you really need to think about where that time is going, and how valuable those things are that it's going into. So those are the 2 things that I immediately think of the, into the future. What am I concerned about? But the other thing that it's honestly probably the hardest for me, and something that I really try to work on, is that day-to-day impact, and being an example, living a Christ-like life, where people look at you that may, not be part of the church, that may be wondering, where they stand with their faith. Maybe they grew up in a Christian household, maybe they didn't. But when they look at you, they think, this guy's a little bit different. He treats people in a great way that's missing from most people. And they become curious because of your actions every single day. And I think that that's what opens people up to what you might have to say about the faith.
I think you're right on. Consistency compounds, right? And since I've gotten to know you, I feel like the word that I think of a lot is just intentionally present. as I hear about you loving your family, as I hear you on calls with investors or just talking to other colleagues, your presence is really one of the best gifts you can give. Not only your spouse or your children, your friends, but just everyday life. It just makes me think about the broader kind of category I'd like to transition into is just finding purpose in work. And I'd love for you just to kind of share a little bit more about what led you to want to start this new career in real estate and in alternative investing, and how you find purpose in your work today.
Yeah, and I'll address another thing that comes along with it. It's kind of what we were talking about before, which is in the financial services or investments world, it's really easy to go down the wrong path and to follow that love of money path, because a lot of people say money is the root of all evil, but it's the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil, is the real passage. And it's so easy to fall into that. And I feel that my experience at Rise, working with you, working with Jeremy on the capital formation team, I couldn't have landed in a better place where you really care about the investors and we really care about our families. We have very similar values, and it's nice to follow a little bit in your footsteps and Jeremy's footsteps, being able to talk about raising your kids. And, there's a lot of wisdom that just in the, maybe 8-10 weeks that I've known you, that I've gotten from you, from your prior experience that you've had. And you've spent more time in the church, and you've seen a lot of things. And that's it's just a really rich experience, because it's not just about the money, and we're not just trying to get money out of people. And that's where I feel so fortunate to have landed here, because I do think it's great to get great returns for people, because I want people to have that time freedom. Now, having that day-to-day impact, that is something that everybody has to focus on. But that time freedom, allowing you to get involved in the things that you want to be involved with, I have a big passion behind that. I want people to get there, and I legitimately have fun. Like every phone call that I'm on that somebody's exploring real estate investment, I actually have a lot of fun with it. So for me, it's not, again, it's not about a future Lamborghini that I want. It's not about any kind of future luxury, exotic vacation, none of it. For me, it's that whole time freedom concept, and then helping people get to what they're looking to get to, and just really having fun through the process. So I know I just said a lot there, but I was just trying to encapsulate what I'm doing here, and why I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, that's really exciting. What do you feel like led you, kind of top three reasons why you wanted to change industries, and why this opportunity is so exciting for you?
Yeah, the number one thing is I've been so interested in real estate investing, and it's something that, honestly, if I went back in time, I probably would have, before having kids, having that responsibility, I probably could have been a real estate agent, maybe single family homes, or, on the commercial side, and then just focused on real estate investing full time and being an agent. But I had a good career where I was. I really liked what I was doing. It wasn't the most exciting topic in the world to me, but I was treated really well, and had a pretty good time with that. And it allowed me to invest. But that's the first thing is I was able to make that cut over to real estate without having to go to making $0 like I would have as a real estate agent, which I had considered about 30 times in the last 15 years. But the other piece is it's a company that I believe in, because I've already been investing with Rise 48. I really, the founders are great, trustworthy people that are really transparent about what they're doing and how they do it. And Jeremy Dyer, he, for anybody that doesn't know, he's the head of capital formation here. And Nick and I are on his team. And he's really the one that got me into investing into real estate syndications. So I started in that world, and then, ended up investing more in Rise deals because I liked them for a couple reasons. And I know this is a little off topic, but being vertically integrated and seeing that all the projects were going on time, that was what made me go from, looking at multiple sponsors to just doing more Rise deals. So that is another thing that brought me to Rise 48 is I don't need to be apprehensive at all when I talk with investors about, like, is this offering actually good? Is this offering maybe something that has negative impacts to people? I never have to think about that because what we're doing is improving workforce housing. And I know we're being as transparent as possible with our investors, and that these really are great investment options. So that wasn't three, but those two are so big that really, it takes up most of my reasoning of why this was so attractive.
I'm Zach Captainstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investor. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
I think, finding purpose in work and enjoying who you are, really starts with the culture and the team dynamic that the culture you're a part of, is a part of. I think some people are a part of cultures where, they're moving more towards thriving, life-giving relationships being developed holistically and being encouraged to grow in your leadership and as a person. It just makes me think a lot about, what are those things that you can cultivate yourself to help you, find more enjoyment, in your work. So, when it comes to like culture and team, like how do you celebrate? What problems are you trying to overcome as a team? What are those things that you're currently doing that's helping to add to the culture? More as caught than taught. So how do you, teams that you've been a part of, like how have you really developed that culture with the team that you're a part of?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying when I was managing people in some of my previous roles, it really was the culture to me that I wanted to develop on my team was based on um, servant leadership, and that can mean a lot of things to different people, but to me it meant what can I do for these people to improve the way that they are accomplishing what they need to accomplish. So it's not just how do I give them what they need to be good at their job, but how can I give them what they need to be good at their job and to improve their home life and to improve, what they're trying to accomplish goal wise. Because there's a lot more to work than just the hours that we are at work. So those were always focuses of mine. And I really hope that the people that worked for me were able to feel that I really wanted the best for them as human beings and not just as a top performer on my team. So yeah, so that was me more as a leader and as a manager, where now I'm in a very different place where I am, as people would call, an individual contributor because I'm working directly with investors. And what I want to do is just help accomplish the goals of the leaders within the organization. So I want to make it easier for them to complete the strategic things that they're working on and not be bogged down with the minutia, with the smaller things that an individual contributor like me can take care of.
It's really good. So, one of the main reasons we wanted to start this podcast is, so many people struggle with thinking about their faith being maybe something they do on Sundays or Wednesday nights. But if we're trying to integrate our faith into our everyday work, where's the time where you've had a trial where you've had to really lean into your faith to get through that trial?
Oh man, there's a couple come to mind, but I'll just say that one was it was a really tough period as far as figuring out. It was just a very unsuccessful time where there was a lot of change going on, but the change didn't really, each time the change was supposed to improve the situation, my whole business unit continued to struggle through it. So it was just very heavy feeling, having sales reps that rely on, a big part of their income being on the commission side, not being paid what they need to be paid, and running into financial issues, and really being able to serve them well while being the face for an organization that really was, maybe not doing everything that I agreed with, and being able to provide enough for those people. So I to be honest with you, I didn't do a very good job of turning to God on it, and maybe giving it up. I just tried to fight my way through it more personally, and it took me probably 8 to 10 months to wisen up to the fact that, I needed to pray much more about it. I needed to have that perspective, like Jesus is king, God is king. I'm not in control of this thing. And the executives at this company aren't even in control of this thing. And I can honestly say, again, I'm not proud to say it, but I didn't do great. But as time wore on, having a good supportive wife that reminds me of this kind of stuff, belonging to a good church with really supportive people, belonging to a great Bible study where we talk about this kind of stuff, finally I came around more to being more reliant on the prayer, relying on God, not putting it on myself that I could fix this whole thing and just somehow use my intellect to fix this unfixable thing. So that really, more than a story of triumph and me being great in this trial, it really was more of a lesson than anything to me.
Yeah, I think that's how God works. Like he gives us trials, personally, professionally, family centered, where we have nowhere else to turn except to ask for help. And when it comes to like a leader listening to this, we all face trials, right? We can connect over pain. What does that look like practically to turn to God, to give it to Him, to pray? Is it like you go to the bathroom and you lock yourself in the bathroom and you say a prayer? You go for a walk, like you go through a journaling exercise. You talk about it later during the day. Like you just kind of get through it and then you go there. Or is there actually an opportunity in the moment to acknowledge that the creator of the universe created the job and the field that you're in, and he can help you through whatever trial, tribulation that you're a part of? How do we do that as faith-driven leaders?
For me, in my experience, and this is something that unfortunately I come to you not as an expert, as like a lot of the people on the Rise podcast are experts in their field. This is really something that I need a lot of work in, but I am certainly working on it. And I think what it is a muscle where you need to work it. For me, it wasn't like an overnight thing. It was more of talking with my wife about it, talking with my small group about it, reading the Bible, maybe running into something that gives me a little bit more clarity on it. It was more of like a development rather than, a light bulb kind of thing. And what it took for me is day to day, even being able to, I wasn't like fixed or something like now I do it perfectly, but it was something that I would do a higher and higher percentage of time where it would come to mind to really handle it properly and be able to give it to God. And by give it to God, I don't mean, I know that some phrases can almost become trite, but for me, it's to not take on the ownership that I control the world, because that's sometimes how we feel is, there are some things we can control. There are other things we can't control. We can influence certain things. But I think that it's just having that mindset of where you're going to do everything that you can, but then not be anxious about it, because that's another part of the Bible that we really don't talk about a ton as Christians, is that we're told to not be anxious, and yet we're probably guilty of that every single day.
I do this little daily devotion, and it gave this picture of these people kind of lined up, and some of the people had this, sack of something over their shoulder, right? And the sack was representing a burden that we carry, and so often we take up that burden, and then we give it to God by dropping it at His feet, and yet out of our anxiety, sometimes we then go ahead and pick it back up again. When I think the burden that we have, insert the trial that you're facing, trouble at work, trouble financially, trouble in a relationship, whatever the trouble may be, we can, pray, talk to other people about it, drop off that burden at the feet of Jesus, so to speak. And yet often we're all guilty of then picking it back up again and feeling the burden of having, multiple bags over our back. And we're feeling this proclivity to just always feel like we need to do something about it versus giving it to God. Insert that giving it to God phrase, whether that's a burden, a trial, a dream, a desire, an investment that you hope will yield a great return, whatever that thing is. I think as faith-driven leaders, an aim or a charge that we should all be encouraging each other towards is actually give it to God and don't pick it back up again. He calls each of us to different seasons. And in some seasons, they're seasons of plenty. In some seasons, they're seasons of want. So what season do you feel like God's calling you into right now, Jason? And what would be your encouragement to our listeners, to really give those burdens, those dreams, those desires to God?
Yeah. I think it's honestly a season of growth. That's how I would define it. And I just want to say one more thing about the anxiety and taking on the burden and everything. As I've gotten better at doing this, it literally has improved my sleep. From the day that my son was born, which was 8.5 years ago, my sleep it was never the same again. Not necessarily because kids are always waking me up, that kind of thing. Anxiety. I realized it was anxiety that was keeping me up. And then I would take on whatever's going on at work, especially, the kids and home life, that was part of it. But especially work, I think now looking back on it, I realize that the better I am giving it to God, not just dwelling, not having that anxious feeling like my thoughts are somehow going to control something, or as Solomon says, like, can any amount of worry add a day to your life? For me, I'm not going to say you, as I have taken that on a little bit more and practiced that more, it literally has actually made my sleep better. For anybody that was really catching on to anything, I use an Aura ring to track my sleep, and it's just so notably better than what it was before.
Wow. Like literally a physical manifestation of better sleep, more rest. So, okay, just maybe to help me out, help our listeners out, is there a tool, a phrase, a Bible verse, a book that you feel like you go to when you have those moments of anxiousness? How do you get through that?
Yeah, I think part of it is it's a little bit of everything. I do think that it is daily being in the Bible and getting that higher perspective again. Some of it is prayer. And one of the things, and again, this is not me handling it right, but I like to be as transparent as I can be. Um, you know, as all those changes that I was talking about, those challenges where I disagreed so fundamentally with some of the things that were happening, and it was impacting me, it was impacting my team. It was almost like I wanted to see some of those people fail, and that's just not good. That's not a good characteristic to have. I don't want to have a characteristic like that. And and one of the things that this will sound kind of maybe wrong, but it really did help me with letting certain things go. And that's the whole, the verse about vengeance is the Lord's. Like, you should never wish ill on anybody for anything, or hope something doesn't turn out well for somebody. Whatever it is, that should never be on your mind. And I think that there was a time that was on my mind, where I so badly wanted to be right and to improve the situation as I saw it, that I almost was like hoping for that vengeance to see people fail. So I think that if that's something that is on your mind or on your heart, that, after you're honest with yourself, do you have some of those feelings? That would be my one phrase, or my one verse, is vengeance is the Lord's. Like, you if somebody is truly doing something evil, God will deal with it. And if it's not evil, it's just something you disagree with, you just got to get over that, because you just disagree with those people. So it takes you out of the equation from even needing to figure out if they're bad or wrong, or maybe you're wrong. It just takes you totally out of that equation when you have that mindset.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I think we can all relate to what you're describing, and that's a great place to know that you know the season that we have here on Earth is just a temporary blip compared to eternity being forever, right? If it's 70, 80, maybe 90, 100 years if you're lucky, that's not a long time compared to eternity. And I've really been thinking a lot about legacy. And one of the reasons I love this industry of alternative investments is it gives you the opportunity to really leave the legacy that you want to leave to your family, and hopefully to your community as well. And one of the most helpful things I've heard from someone is start at your funeral, design your life, and then work your way backwards towards the life that you want to live. And a lot of reasons people invest with companies like Rise 48 is they want to buy back their time. They want to have time freedom. But I think deep down inside of all of us, it is a dream that God's put in our hearts somewhere down in there. What is that initiative you want to help tackle? That problem you want to solve? That thing you want to maybe start in your community? And perhaps an investment like in a Rise 48 deal could help jumpstart that dream that you have. So maybe just to close things out here, Jason, we talk about like the hope of Jesus. We talk about grace, we talk about gospel. What's a comforting word, phrase, passage that you just want to give to our audience as we all deal with trials, tribulations, anxieties?
Honestly, Nick, I'm going to have a hard time with that one. I don't have anything that comes to mind. Uh, I may have a hard time taking us out on that one.
That's okay. Any other kind of final word that you'd like to leave to our audience as we're talking about just finding purpose in work, or some of the things we've discussed today?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway, for what I would like people to take away, is that it starts today. So you're working right now. Maybe you don't have a lot of free time. You haven't earned that time freedom. There are surgeons out there that are working effectively every second of their waking life. People are on call all the time. You may not be able to volunteer at this time. There are a lot of things that you probably want to do that you don't have the ability to do yet. So in the time that you have, in the time that you're at work, you're dealing with patients or maybe coworkers or clients, really show them A, the love of God, and B, make them curious about why you live the way that you live. And I think that right there, it being the Christian example, living like Christ, that's what being a Christian is being Christ-like. So I think that's what you do today. And then planning for the future. It is very, very biblical. People are concerned about, is money going to make them evil, because money's the root of all evil, like we talked about before. They think that way, but they don't think of the many, many times that in the Bible talks about having storehouses, about putting away grain, about thinking about the future, planning for the future, and ultimately earning that time freedom by making intelligent investments and by not trying to impress people. When you get money, not trying to impress, but really earning the ability to do what you want and what you value in the future. So those are the big takeaways that I hope people get from this, is that there's never an excuse to not be working on part of this and working on yourself and trying to spread that love like I was talking about. But I really hope that there are people out there that we'll be able to have a conversation with about how we could potentially earn some time freedom. Sometimes even Rise 48 isn't exactly what you need in this season, but I still like having those conversations because I like the planning part of it. Rise 48 might be right for you in 2 years or 3 years, or maybe it's just not right for you for what you're comfortable with. But I do hope that we get to have some conversations where we get to talk about this, because one, I think that it does lead you to being able to be a little freer and be able to do the things that you value. But the other is, I just love connecting with people, talking with them about what they're passionate about, and seeing if I can positively impact their personal lives.
Thank you, audience, for coming and being a part of this Faith Driven Leader podcast. And we talked about a lot of great ideas and concepts here around time freedom, around finding purpose in work. And at the end of the day, we're all trying to be the person that God has designed us to be. That inherently comes with different seasons of trial and plenty. And the God of the universe wants relationship with you. There's a verse in the Bible that says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only begotten Son. And whoever believes in him does not perish, but has eternal life." And that's one of the verses that would maybe describe what does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to have faith? And at the end of the day, it's faith in having a relationship with the God who made us and who gives us new life. And one of the things we want to explore as we keep engaging as faith-driven leaders is how we find our hope amidst trials, how we find our hope as God puts dreams on our hearts, how we find hope as we think about making investments and having that legacy that we want to have. So keep joining us each week as we learn from other faith-driven leaders of how they integrate their faith to their work. We'd love to get connected. Drop me a line below, and would love to reach out and get to know you more. So thanks so much for your time, and thanks for listening.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the On the Rise podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the On the Rise podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.